folks, welcome back to the Frontier Western Heritage Channel. I'm Todd Kessner here outside of Tucson, Arizona, and today we're going to take a look at Army versus Navy Part 1. Well, the last video I tested the knockdown power of the 1851 Navy, and for whatever reason that video got a lot of attention and a ton of comments, and I do read the comments because I learn a lot from folks that are viewers. Everybody's got their own perspective and there's some good things that come through those comments. But there's a couple of them that I wanted to address. One is there was a few folks, 3 or 4 out of a couple hundred that made mention of it anyway, had an issue with me saying knockdown power because there's no such thing as knockdown power. And you know, to be honest, we're measuring energy, and what exactly that can be in the end result depends on bullet form and, you know, shape and mass and a whole bunch of things. But in a sense that those comments are correct, because there's no gun that's going to pick somebody up off the ground and throw them. If that's what you're thinking about knockdown power, that's not really the concept I was looking at. Matter of fact, if you watch in the movie, somebody gets hit with 12 gauge buckshot and goes flying up against against the wall of a building or something. I'm thinking of Open Range, when the guy gets the buckshot and goes slamming up against the wall of the neighboring building. And that doesn't happen. I mean, in TV, they've got a harness on a stuntman or whoever they're pulling, and then they got guys on a rope and they yank them. If you're thinking that's knockdown power, that's not what I'm thinking about. If you are old enough to have hunted ducks with lead shot and then had to make the transition to steel shot, you know exactly what I'm talking about knockdown power. Enough energy to put an animal down humanely and quickly if you're hunting, and that's why you use a large enough caliber or a strong enough velocity anyway for a big game animal, because you want to put that animal down and not have it get away from you. That's really what I'm talking about with knockdown power. So in that last video, when I was shooting the 51 Navy, I compared that power, that energy, back to a video I did 2-3 years ago on the 1860 Army, and showed the table of the two different energies, and they're very close together, actually overlapped, I think, with the round ball, if I remember right. And some of you guys, and I knew this was going to happen, and I appreciate it, that you went back and looked and wrote in the comments that the 1860 Army that I had tested, the load I tested was with either, I think it was 2F GoX. And then in the 51 Navy, I was shooting 3F Swiss. And so it's not a fair comparison. Well, that is absolutely correct. And so you guys that went back and checked out that other video and going, hey, this doesn't add up, this doesn't make a, you know, apples to apples type comparison, you're absolutely right. So that's why I'm out here today. I've got a 2nd generation Colt 1860 Army, and I've got a 2nd generation 1851 Navy. Today we're going to shoot the Army, but both of them are 2nd generation Colts. I'm going to use conical, and I'm going to use round ball, and I'm going to use 3F Swiss in both of them. And by the time we're done, I'll have a chart, and we'll look at the chart and we can say with a little more reliability that I'm actually comparing the two firearms a little more fairly. So let's take a look at conicals first and see what kind of velocities we're going to get out of this, and I'll load it up and get the caps on and we'll get ready to go. Before we go any farther, I want to put these guns in perspective, and so I'm going to bring you back here into the Kessner Presidential Library just for a few minutes, and I can hear some of you groaning because you just like to see fire and smoke, but this will put this a little bit better perspective for you as we're looking at the 1860 Army with this particular test. So we've got the 51 Navy on top. Let me reach out here and get it. So this was the previous video. We tested this gun, 36 caliber, 7.5 inch barrel, and called the belt model because it was handy, light enough, small enough, handy enough, balanced well enough to have on your person instead of on your horse. And that's the Navy revolver. The Army revolver at the time when the Navy came out was the Dragoon, and the Dragoon 6-shot, 40 grains of powder, 7.5 inch barrel, and basically just a little bit smaller version of the Walker, but didn't save you a whole lot of weight and a whole lot of bulk. Some, but not to the point where you're going to call this a belt pistol. So wouldn't it have been great to have a belt pistol in .44 caliber that the Army could use, had a little more power to it? And that came around because of the invention or the improvement in steel that was called silver steel. So by the time the 1860 came out, they were able, 1860 Army, and Army again because it's 44 caliber, 6-shot, 8-inch barrel on this one, but not nearly the bulk. And that was because of the improvement in steel. And silver steel is a high carbon, strong steel that doesn't really have any silver in it, but when you were done polishing it, it looked very silvery. So it was a very high polished steel that kind of looked like silver. And so it got that silver steel label. So you're able to take a 44 caliber and bring it down to the size just a little bit bigger than the 51 Navy and have this one be a belt model as well as the 51 Navy a belt model. So now we've got an Army pistol that is 44 caliber and you can carry on your belt. So when this hit the market, it wasn't called the 1860 Army at the time. The original name was the Colt New Model Army. And if you're thinking that sounds familiar, Remington did the same thing. And so often in the early history of these firearm manufacturers, when something new came out, they would call it the new model whatever. And this one is the new model Army or the new model belt pistol. So again, it is advertising an Army pistol 44 caliber that would go on your belt in a holster and be a personal carry on your person type of firearm. Colt advertised the 1860 Army as having the same power as the Dragoon in a smaller package. And I guess you could advertise and say anything in those days, but reality is that this doesn't hold the amount of powder that the Dragoon holds, and so there's no way that this thing is going to outperform the Dragoon. Instead of scaling down the Dragoon, the 1860 Army is a kind of a scale up, I guess you could say, of the 1851 Navy. And I can take this frame apart, and it's kind of hard to do this in the viewfinder, so I'm sorry for the shakiness of it. This one comes apart like it should. You guys, some folks had mentioned on that last video that shouldn't have to have a mallet to take your wedge out every time. And that is true. You wouldn't have a mallet with you every time you're riding around. But this is the 1851 Navy frame. And you can see there's a little bit of a step cut into the frame. And that will accommodate this blown out cylinder. So the front of this cylinder is larger than the back. So we've got a 51 Navy back end and we got a 44 caliber front end. And if you can see down inside those chambers at all, you'll see that it gets smaller as we go towards the back. This allowed for the 1851 Navy frame that people really liked to be used in the 1860 Army. So that step in the frame, that bump out of the front of the cylinder, and then a very sleek and round barrel, and then the addition, if I can get that back together, then the addition of what they call the creeping loading lever. And you can see there's gears, kind of teeth down in there that go up into holes in the barrel and make this thing a little bit better with leverage and a little bit easier to use. So those are the major differences between the 51 and the 1860. The other difference would be the grip. And again, I apologize, I keep running into this thing trying to look through the viewfinder, but the 1860 Army grip has got a lot bigger grip to it. Your whole hand will fit versus the 51 Navy where your pinky kind of falls off the bottom. I like the 51 Navy grip, and matter of fact, so did a lot of people. Some people love this 1860 Army grip as well, but when you get to the Colt Single Action Army, coming out in 1873, they go back to that Navy grip, and the 1860 grip just kind of goes away with the 1860. Well, I'm doing my loading here on the tailgate this time. I can use my loading stand. It's a little more stable of a platform, and I'm loading the conicals, and much to my delight, they're going in very, very well. If you watch that 1851 Navy video, you know I had a really hard time getting the conicals in there. Primarily because the chambers in that particular gun were really, really small. The chambers on this gun are much smaller than the bullet I'm using, but I'm able to load them. So the difference between the chamber size and the bullet size isn't so much, and I'm not having to slice off quite so much of the conical. So to get the powder in where you can see it, I have got just under 30 grains of 3F Swiss going in here. So I'm using the Johnson & Dow conical, which is from Years Gone bullet molds, and it's a Civil War battlefield pickup that Years Gone had found and made their mold after it. So it is a very, you can see that it sets up nicely, it's got a heel on it. It's a very accurate, historically accurate bullet for the 1860 Army. And I get that situated and straight up and down. we'll get that guy in there. Absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. So that was my last round. I've got 6 rounds loaded and we're ready to go, other than doing a little lube and some caps. This is Montana Extreme Gun Grease, and I'm going to put it on the arbor because I forgot to do that last time and just didn't bother. And this makes a lot of difference. It should anyway make a lot of difference in how long we can shoot this revolver without it getting friction built up because of the fouling on the arbor. One thing I like about a good gun grease, instead of using the same lube that you use on the bullets, this does not get hot and kind of run all over the place. So that ought to be plenty. Keep that cylinder spinning very freely. Another series of comments were regarding the use of the bullet lube on top of the bullet, and that if you're going to holster this gun and carry it around, this probably isn't the way to go. And you're right. There are different concoctions of the lube that don't react as much to the hotter weather like it is here in Arizona. However, it is kind of a messy, dirty thing. And so the guys in the Civil War era, the cap and ball era, talked about putting a greased felt wad underneath the bullet or the round ball and using that greased wad as your lubricant instead of putting them over the top of each chamber. That is a much cleaner way of doing it. But I want to get several shots out of this cylinder and out of this barrel and everything, so I'm going to lube it, just because I want to make sure I've got a lot more lube than would be in a patch that goes down the barrel. And the Johnson & Dow bullet does have a lube grease groove, and I did not dip these ones, and so I'm again going to use the lube over the top instead. And I'll do the same thing for round ball, just so we stay consistent. All right, so I'm going to put this cylinder on this greasy arbor. So I'm all capped up and ready to go. I'm using the Remington number 10s. I found these in basically an antique store. There's a whole sleeve of them and I picked them up. And if you're thinking that your gun takes a number 11, the Remington one is really basically, will fit anything the number 11 will fit. It's just got a longer skirt on it. And I like that on these cap and ball revolvers because it doesn't seem to cap jam as often when I've got this long skirt over that cone. And they seem to work really well. So we'll see how they do on this gun. But we're ready to go. So let's see what happens here with these conicals. Almost 30 grains of black powder, probably about 28. And 217 grain conical. Let the smoke clear. I got 1287. Wow. $11.54. Nope, it had a cap that didn't go off that time. Let me bring her back around. That one went way high, but I'm looking at 758. Maybe I'm not reading this right. $765. I think I was mistaken the decimal point. $743. Yeah, I was. I'm mistaken. It looked like a 1 through the smoke, and it was not. It's a 743.5 apparently. Here's our last shot. $717.3. All right, so there is our first round with the conical bullet and about 28 grains of 3F Swiss. So I'm back here at the tailgate loading, and I have loaded 5 already. This is the last chamber. I'm loading a pretty fair 35 grains of this 3F Swiss. And so I was able to get 35 grains in there and the ball, and it's been an absolute piece of cake. So I might have been able to get, I know I could get a little bit more because there's room in the chambers. So maximum, I certainly haven't maxed it out. I'm getting pretty close, but I haven't maxed it out. Okay, I've got the round ball all seated and greased and the cap's on, and let's see what this round ball will do. That's smoking along at 935. Looks like 898. $928. $936. Well, I wonder if that's just a problem with that particular nipple. And it broke the cap. So rather than having a loose cap at the end of this thing, I'm going to recap that one and try to avoid an issue like a chain fire issue. So let's get that busted cap out of there. There it is. I might have one nipple that's just a little bit bigger or something, and I'm just not getting that cap far enough down on it. But it did hit it hard enough to break it open, so I'm going to make sure I'm on the right chamber. All right, back in business, hopefully. Let's see what happens. There it goes. 951. $914. Okay, we're getting some good velocity out of the round ball. I'm using a 457 round ball. I was going to use the 454. Just a lot of times you use that in the 44, and particularly if the conicals had gone in really hard, I would have used that smaller ball. But the conicals went in really without any problem this time around. So I thought, heck, I'll use the 457 ball. If the conicals go in at 460, the round ball is going to go in at 457. All right, well, there's our conical and round ball. Now, you guys several of you commented also in the last video when I was talking about loading round ball versus loading conical. And you said, you know, if it were Civil War, in the Civil War period, you wouldn't have been loading round ball or conical. You'd be loading a paper cartridge more than likely, and this is the way you would have got them. Now, this is one of mine that I did a reproduction of, and you would have got these because they're a lot easier to issue than powder and ball, unless you wanted to take them apart and do what you wanted to do. So some guys would add a little powder to it without the paper and have room for that and whatever. So it could be done. But more than likely, you just took them right out of here and loaded them. So I've got a few, and I'm really questioning if I'm going to be able to get them in here because they're 30 grains plus the paper. And that conical didn't have a whole lot of extra room. So I'm going to try one and see if I can get it in there. And if I can, then I'll shoot some of the paper cartridge as well. Well, that was an adventure. I tell you what, I got 5 of them. I had 5 loose ones, so I didn't have to open up one of my display ones. I had 5 loose ones in here, and I was able to get 5 in there. However, they didn't go in as far as they needed to, so I had to shave the top off with a hunting knife. So I basically got an 1860 wad cutter right now, and we're going to shoot them out of here and see what that does. I got to go back to the drawing board with my paper cartridges. I had a 1860 Uberti, and these worked well in that I'm finding that these the Colt reproductions, at least that 3rd generation Navy, had really tight cylinder or chambers. This one 445. I don't know what the U-Birdie was, I never measured it, but I could get the full paper cartridge of 30 grains in that one. It was tough, but I could get it in there. I should have backed off a little bit. But I've looked at them historically, and they're a lot smaller. They gave up a lot of powder in order to be able to load that paper cartridge easily. And I can see why, because if you're going to try to load a paper cartridge and you're breaking it because you're trying to bend it around, it's too big, it's got too much powder, it doesn't fall in the chamber as easy as it should. That's kind of defeats the purpose, and so you give up some power for the convenience of a paper cartridge. So let's shoot these and see what we have here. I'm going to have to help the cylinder around a little bit, because even though I cut them down with my knife, there's a few of them still, corners of them sticking out. I'm still smoking her at 762, I think it says. Oh, again, I got to get the doggone cylinder to turn. I think that says 803. Yep. I think I got a weird nipple in there, and I'll have to mark that one. But it did not break the cap that time. Let's see if we can get this one under the, there we go. Shaving a little lead as I'm turning the cylinder. I think it says 808. $763. Let's see if we can get that one to go off that would not go off. Another hit on there. There we go. 756. Okay, there are our paper cartridges. Didn't give up much velocity there, but it's also because I've got 30 grains of powder in those paper cartridges. And I have a lighter bullet now that I'm shooting a semi-wad cutter out of this thing. Well, this is pretty interesting because we have two projectiles that have almost identical energy values here in foot-pounds. We've got the conical that's heavier and going slower, and we've got the round ball that's lighter and going faster, ending up in exactly the same place when it comes to foot-pounds of energy. So if you're making a decision between the two, you're really looking at what you want that bullet to do. And Civil War soldiers had said that the conical has got a better penetration than the round ball, but the round ball has a better slap to it. If you're in a military type situation, you're trying to knock somebody out of the saddle, the round ball would have more shock value because of the blunter surface than the conical. And if you needed to put a horse down, you'd use a conical. So I don't know how often they'd go back and forth, but what it comes down to here is going to be penetration, because your energy is exactly the same. Which brings me maybe to a new video. I want to try that sometime. But this is going to be really interesting to compare to the Navy in the next video and just see where how these two line up. So that'll do it for my Army versus Navy Part 1. We've got all the data we need to run some numbers on the 1860 Army, and next time around I'll pull out the 2nd generation 1851 Navy. This is 2nd generation as well, so we'll compare 2 2nd generation Colts with 3F Swiss, give us a better test of what you give up with the Navy as far as power goes versus the 44 Army. So if you like the video, please hit that thumbs up button. That helps a ton. And if you really like the video, hit subscribe. I really appreciate that. And we will be back in a few weeks with the Army versus Navy Take 2. And again, I want to just thank you for coming. And why I said all that, I don't know. And, nope, wrong way around. Shoot, why can't I get this straight? on, man. Put her back together, put some, whoops, I want to put that down the barrel. And they seem to not cap jam as much because they've got that longer skirt that drops down further onto the cone. So unless you're really partial to short skirts, you can get away with the Remington number 10. See how that all comes together, and yeah, you betcha. Now leave it on.